we're going to go ahead and get started because we're on a little bit of a clock. I'll try to repeat this when more of our colleagues are here. We have folks joining us virtually from California and Texas at 1:45. Don't really want to keep them waiting. So this is going to be a short hit with PJM, but of course, Chair Stanek, Executive Director Stanek knows Maryland well, and I know he'll be available to folks for any kind of follow-up questions that we don't get to today. So in the interest of time, let me turn it over to our friends from PJM Interconnection, Jason Stanek, the Executive Director, who we know as the former Chair of our Public Service Commission, and Stuart Whittam, the Senior Regulatory and Legislative Manager. Thank you both for making the time to be here.
Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and members of the committee. It's a privilege to testify before this committee for my first time. I know that you've had a lot of briefings over the past 10 days with respect to energy and utilities. Now you're having an opportunity to speak to the grid operator, and we operate the power grid for 13 states plus the District of Columbia. Some of you have had the opportunity to visit us, and I would encourage all of you to come to our control room at some point where we could host and explain. Here on the screen is our control room that we operate out of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. This morning, we hit 140 gigawatts. The system is under tremendous stress this week. We're operating under emergency conditions. We've issued cold weather alerts, maximum generation alerts. So effectively, every power plant that could produce is operating today. You might have heard that the Department of Energy recently issued 202C emergency orders. And currently, we have, at least in the state of Maryland, 19 units that are operating or have the potential to operate under emergency authority. These are all gas and oil units. So what I'd like to do is provide you with a high level of what PJM is, what we do, who we are, and then we'll conclude this brief presentation with solutions that you as state legislators may wish to consider to address issues such as affordability, which we all know our PEPCO, BG, SMECO, Chop Tank customers are experiencing tremendous pressures. So who is PJM? We are the grid operator for the Mid-Atlantic. You see us there in dark blue. We sit within the Eastern Interconnection, which is one of 3 interconnections in the United States. Eastern, Western, and Texas, which is known as ERCOT, who you'll be hearing from the Texas Commissioner shortly. Just some statistics here, 21% of the country's GDP is in the PJM territory. In addition to the 6 million Marylanders we serve, we operate 88,000 miles of transmission lines. We have 1,100 members. We're a very transparent body. Members of this General Assembly participate regularly in PJM stakeholder meetings. I would just note that we are the largest bulk power system in North America, and we've had the privilege of being the grid operator for 99 years. Maryland's been a part of this grid for 70 years, and we hope to continue serving the state into the future. As an organization, we operate as a nonprofit, which is different than most of the utilities. To the extent we collect 10 cents over our budget, that 10 cents is returned to the membership. We don't have any shareholders. We don't have a stock price. PJM oftentimes has become a punching bag recently because we don't typically fight back. We don't have any shareholders that are in a position to defend their investments. But we are your operator. We are nonpartisan. We are also fuel neutral. Whether it be clean energy resources or fossil resources, we don't take a position there. We need every single watt on the system. We're fully regulated by the federal government through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We do not make any policy without getting permission of FERC to approve all of our tariffs, all of our rules, all of our procedures. FERC is based in Washington. We are governed by an independent 9-member board of directors. We also have an independent market monitor who is often critical of PJM policies that have been approved by FERC. So the market monitor keeps the grid honest. And at the end of the day, we're mission driven. Our job is to keep the lights on 24/7 around the clock, but we're also aware that sustainability, affordability, and other concerns that are affecting cost implications are top of mind for us. What do we do as a grid operator, also known as a regional transmission organization? We have three key functions. Number one, we plan the grid. So like an urban planner would plan interstates to new developments, we plan transmission lines. I should note that we do not own practically anything. We don't own the transmission lines. We don't own any generation. We don't own any bucket trucks similar to Pepco or BGE. We have the equipment in the control room. We have some pens and some desks, but that is how we're different than most utilities. Operations in the middle there, you just saw our control room. We're effectively the air traffic controller. We dispatch power across the transmission lines from where it's generated to where it's consumed. And because you're in a multi-state grid, power that's generated in Illinois could make its way for consumption in Baltimore. And finally, we operate a number of markets, real-time energy markets, capacity markets, which you may have heard of because of high prices recently, and other markets for other services. So we are a market operator. Think of us as an auctioneer. So this is our system map. You could see that we have different colors for different lines. These are the high voltage lines across PJM. The green lines, which there are few in lime green there, are 765 kilovolt lines. Those are the largest in the United States. Then you have 500 kV lines, which is what Maryland has. And then you have 345 kV, which has been adopted in some of the states to our west. Now, if we zoom into Maryland, this is just the same map, but just zoomed in. You can see that Maryland doesn't have any ultra high voltage lines on the Eastern Shore. And largely west in the Panhandle, you have that one line crossing at the far west in Garrett County. But we've had trouble in our state. I'm a resident of College Park. We've had trouble in our state building high voltage transmission lines. When I was at the PSC, I approved a number of lines that ultimately did not get built. We could use the lines on cold days like today. I'll be the first to admit this is just a quick slide that sort of defends PJM's value. This was just issued last week. Through economies of scale, it shows our net savings for the footprint is approximately $5 billion a year. This highlights the value of competition and the value of transparency as well. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. It's in your packet. So what do we have available to PJM? We have approximately 1,400 resources: coal, wind, solar, nuclear, gas, hydro, and they're all represented. Our control room has the ability to dispatch these units, and as you can see, we have about 181 gigawatts available to us. This morning around 9 a.m., we hit 140 gigawatts. Of course, keep in mind that at any given time, some of these units are going to be out for maintenance. Some of them will break down and are not available. But in a perfect world, this is what we have available to PJM. On this next slide, you'll see what we have coming out of Maryland. I know it says Maryland and DC, but it's almost entirely Maryland's generation. Maryland has, it's about 50% gas units installed, which means in the ground in the state of Maryland. We have nuclear, which is represented here entirely by Calvert Cliffs. We have coal, which is mostly the Brandon Shores unit in Anne Arundel. We have a large oil supply, believe it or not. It doesn't always run, but some of it will be running during this cold snap. What might surprise you is in Maryland, we don't have a lot of solar. We don't have a tremendous amount of wind, although I know we have aspirations to be a clean energy leader. And then finally, hydro, that's coming from Conowingo. On the next pie chart, this shows you what our in-state generator production actually is. The previous chart shows you what we have available, but this is what actually runs on any given day. About 45% or so natural gas and 45% or so coming from nuclear Calvert Cliffs in the lime green there. You might have heard of another organization called NERC. So we have FERC as our regulator. NERC is another body based in Washington, D.C. that is responsible for overseeing all of the bulk power systems and their reliability components. All of the bulk power systems are outlined there in black lettering, and you'll see where PJM is. Every year, this independent body, NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, conducts a study to determine where the systems stand. Orange represents elevated risk, and that's the risk that there may be a resource adequacy shortfall during elevated conditions. Today is an elevated condition. Resource adequacy means, do we have enough supply generation? Do we have enough generation to meet demand? Nobody's on the red list as of yet, but being on the orange elevated risk is something that we're mindful of, and we recognize that the supply-demand fundamentals that PJM has been warning of for several years are coming closer to fruition. I would say I testified before ECM 1 year ago this week, where I noted that the outlook for energy in the state of Maryland is dire. The conditions have not abated since my testimony to your colleagues in ECM 1 year ago. And that's partly illustrated on this slide here, which represents our forecast for electric demand into the future. Every year, we create a new trend line, and you can see all the trend lines have a year associated with them. This was just released yesterday. You can see the dotted line is 2026. It has changed somewhat from the 2025 forecast in that the near-term years, right, 27, 28, 29, there has been some reduction in the forecast. But in the further out years, we expect electric demand to continue to grow. What's interesting on this chart, if you look at the bottom, all of the lines were relatively flat for many years through COVID. That effectively indicated that demand for electricity was not growing. What changed in 24, 25, and 26? Largely the rise of data centers, to a lesser extent electric vehicle adoption, but data centers is largely attributable to these year-over-year massive gains to the likes we've not seen before. Maryland, as we all know, is a net energy importer. Approximately 40% of its electricity needs are imported daily. That's neither here nor there. As a market, we have states that export and import. If everybody was an exporter, we'd have nobody to import. So we manage that for the state of Maryland. However, what you see in the inset is concerning because Maryland has retired in recent years about 6,000 megawatts of thermal resources. So these are mostly fossil fuel resources. And the additions have been dwarfed by the retirements, something I'll come back to in a moment. We love all of our resources, and we'll take watts from any resources. I know this is a little difficult to see, but on the left side in the blue, you'll see 20 different types of generators by fuel type, including solar, wind, battery storage, diesel, steam, you name it, it's on the list there. These ratings, effectively a checklist, allow our engineers to determine that on a particularly stressful day, what percentage of the output from a particular facility could we receive? The lowest performing unit here is fixed solar, which is on the third line, 7%. Our highest performing unit, which sets the gold standard, is nuclear, as you see about halfway down, 95%. So effectively, if we had a 1,000 megawatt solar farm and a 1,000 megawatt nuclear facility, on a day like today, we'd expect the nuclear facility to produce about 950 megawatts, and the solar facility would produce about 70. So this is a handy scorecard. It's updated every year as we approach a new capacity auction, and it's based on historical track records and actual run times and capacity outputs of these units. I'd like to touch on the queue. You may have heard about the queue. It's been rather maligned in recent years, and it's effectively the pipeline for new generation projects to tie into our system. And before we let a generator tie into the system, we need to perform a number of studies to ensure that it could safely connect. Around 2020, we saw the number of applications to join the queue increase exponentially. It was effectively doubling every year. PJM stakeholders worked on a solution that we developed about a year afterwards in 2021. FERC approved the solution in 2022, and it was implemented in 2023. The queue problems of the past in terms of delays have been fully resolved at this point. The backlog will be eliminated by April of this year. We expect to move to a 1 to 2 year turnaround time, hopefully quicker. We're using artificial intelligence and the help of Google to move the queue along. Additionally, the reforms at FERC have also gated the number of developers filing applications at the queue. Unfortunately, we had a lot of developers that were filing projects that had effectively no chance of ever being developed. There were no deposits being required, so that encouraged developers to file even more applications. On the right side, you'll see we currently have 57 gigawatts, right? That's 57,000 megawatts of fully approved through the queue projects that we hope connect to the grid sometime soon, but they've not connected at this point. We do contact them and ask them why they haven't been moving fast enough. The top 3 issues are siting and permitting at the state level, supply chain issues, getting the infrastructure, and financing. Interest rates have been moving in the wrong direction for some of these projects. Taking a look at the queue and our projects with interconnection agreements across the footprint, we currently have 514 projects, and that corresponds with the number I just showed you, 57.3 gigawatts. I'd like to also look at Maryland, and let's zoom into Maryland here. We currently have 21 projects that have graduated the queue. We're waiting for them to connect into the PJM system. We have 10 projects in Maryland that are still in the queue, and you could see where some of the projects are located, indicated by the shading by county. So in those 2 pie charts on the left, you'll see we have 1.7 gigawatts of signed agreements in hand, and we have 1.7 gigawatts under study. I would say that when I testified before ECM last January, that number was 7.3. It's now 1.7, so it's dropped tremendously. It will be 0 before long. 2 quick updates before I wish to provide some solutions to this body. You may have heard that Governor Moore visited the White House 2 Fridays ago. Governor Moore, with some other PJM governors and the Trump administration, came up with a plan. This plan was independent of everything PJM has been working on, but these 2 plans, competing plans, were unveiled on the very same day 2 Fridays ago. Fortunately, when we saw the plan from Governor Moore and the Trump administration, it largely mirrored the plan that we've been working on with our legislators, including Maryland legislators. Some of you are in that panel. We've been working collaboratively with our stakeholders since August. We unveiled that plan 2 Fridays ago, as did the White House and the governors. What did it do? There are 6 core elements here. I'd be happy to go into greater depth, but it's looking forward to requiring data centers to bring their own generation when they wish to develop. That's the first item. Number 2, data centers that don't bring their own generation may be subject to curtailment when the system is under stress. Number 3, the governors and the White House wish that PJM conduct a reliability backstop auction. It's effectively an auction to procure additional capacity to supply the needs of data centers. Number 4, we have a number of load forecasting improvements underway. That's to ensure that we're not double counting or triple counting data centers. There's also a role for your state PSC in that process as well. Number 5, we're planning to study market incentives on how to encourage new supply. Obviously, we have a capacity price signal that is very high, but we're not necessarily seeing generators effectively grab that price and start building new generation, at least not in the state of Maryland. Number 6, as you may know, there is currently a cap on the capacity price in PJM, and that cap is $333 per megawatt day. The governors and the White House wish for PJM to continue that cap for 2 more years. We have an open comment period which expires tomorrow, asking for the feedback from PJM members, PJM legislators, and others. So we're looking forward to that decision. This is an eye chart. You don't need to look at it closely, but this is probably the most important slide for legislators on this panel here. What actions can you take from Annapolis in order to address affordability concerns? And I recently heard one say, well, the state doesn't control electricity prices. As your former state utility regulator, I could tell you that is not true. Half of the charges on the utility bill have either been approved by the state, notably the state PSC, or imposed by the state. Your constituents in PEPCO, BG, other service territories pay a number of taxes, franchise tax, gross receipts tax, county energy tax, Maryland environmental surcharge, Empower tax, universal service surcharge for Maryland. So these are all on-bill items that either the PSC or the General Assembly have the ability to address. Now, there are also items on your bill under the supply side of the bill. That was the distribution side. Supply side contains generation and contains transmission. There is no line for, even though we've been talking about capacity prices, there's no line for capacity prices on the bill that is embedded on your supply side. So these are some items that we actually published an article recently. Retail cost allocation is the first one. Your PSC has the ability to shift costs between residential customers and industrial commercial customers. Data center commitments. 2 states, particularly Virginia and Ohio, have been at the leading edge of requiring data centers to put financial deposits down to make sure that they don't back out after the grid is paid out and built for them. Ohio has effectively said, put 80% deposit on the barrel, and if you don't come, we keep the money. So there's other states that are moving forward. Default service procurement, as you know, Maryland is a restructured state. I heard some other witnesses refer to us as a deregulated state. That is not true. There is fully regulated, but it is restructured, has been restructured since 1999. Up until recently, we had retail competition amongst energy suppliers. So that is something that we've reached out to the Public Service Commission to help them better align their SOS, standard offer service, on your utility bill if you don't choose a supplier. And effectively, you can't choose a supplier anymore in Maryland, at least for residential customers. And we could work together to figure out if there are any efficiencies between PJM and your default service. We talked about state programs on the utility bill, and I noted a number of them, and some of them, like Empower, have been producing for well over a decade, but it's not an insubstantial charge. Average customer is paying somewhere north of $20 per month. Let me skip to the last one, siting and permitting. Largely within the hands of the Public Service Commission, most recently informed by the Renewable Energy Certainty Act that was passed by the legislature last year. We do have a long way to go, though, in helping the PSC with respect to speeding up some of these permits, which are known as certificates of public convenience and necessity. My final slide here, which I implore not only to Maryland legislators, but to all 13 states in which we have the opportunity to serve. One, we beg you to avoid policies that would push existing resources off the system until an adequate and equivalent amount of generation is online to support it. And when I say adequate and equivalent, I'd like you to think back to that chart, the blue chart, where not every resource has the same capacity output on a stress day like today. And tomorrow, we might, in our 99-year history, we might set an all-time record. 99-year history, tomorrow might be the day that we break our winter record. Number 2, states should help bring new generation resources onto the system as soon as possible. How do we do that as states? Some states have looked at particular energy investment funds, sending signals and I think the Next Generation Act started last year, that Maryland is open for business. You could build power generation in this state. I should also note that in addition to power generation, transmission infrastructure, which I didn't heavily touch on today, Maryland is at a deficit of. So the state needs both transmission infrastructure and generation. Number three, states should look at improvements to siting and permitting. Obviously, you don't want to cut short any stakeholder process, public feedback, environmental reviews, but some of these reviews cannot take years upon years to complete. And finally, this is self-evident, but consider consumer cost increases as a natural byproduct of policies that exacerbate this underlying supply-demand imbalance. At the end of the day, electricity is a commodity. If there's a demand for it that outstrips supply, the price will continue to go up and up and up. Thank you again for your attention. I know you've heard from everybody from utilities to regulators to ratepayer advocates in the past week. We're one voice in this discussion, and we hope you could use this as a resource. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. We only have about 20 minutes for questions. Some of you weren't here, but as I said at the top, we have 2 out-of-state folks zooming in for our next briefing, so we will take as many questions as we can. But Mr. Stanek, as he noted, lives in College Park. He has a hired lobbyist. Brian, raise your hand. So we have lots of ways to follow up with him outside of this setting. Let's start with Delegate Baylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stanek, for being here today. I have a few questions. I'll just ask one for the interest of time. One of the things that we've heard about a lot thus far is this idea of like phantom load, and I think you mentioned it previously, where data centers are potentially applying to multiple states. I'm just wondering if you can help the committee understand what steps you have taken at the PJM level to kind of certify those applications to make sure that load projections are accurate. And I think you all recently downgraded 4 gigawatts, the recent projections for data centers. So could you help us understand that a little bit?
That's right. Like any forecast, I could guarantee you that the forecast will be wrong, similar to a weather forecast. But we have some of the best forecasters in the business hired by PJM. What we typically do, and up until 2 years ago when we didn't have data center or increasing loads, we would work with our utilities because they're on the ground, PEPCO, BGE. PEPCO, tell us who you're talking to, who's trying to build a new data center in Bethesda, so to speak. And they would give us the numbers. Okay, they're going to need 800 megawatts, and then we'd put that into our forecast. We have discovered that some of these large hyperscalers, for proprietary reasons, they don't want to necessarily share. They may be building one data center in Virginia, which is the Dominion territory, and another one on the other side in Frederick in the Potomac Edison service territory. Those 2 utilities aren't speaking together. When it rolls up to PJM, we might be able to spot it if it looks like, you know what, these 2 shadows look very, very close. We know we need to do more than that. In this proposal that we announced just 2 Fridays ago, similar to the governor's proposal, we are going to be putting these data requests under a microscope, particularly if they're not bringing cash to the table, deposits. We're hiring outside vendors as well to effectively check our work. Notably, we're asking the public service commissions in all of our states, you have an interesting seat from your offices in Baltimore. We're going to give you, the state, an opportunity to review the forecast for your state as well. Let us know if you see any problems. We'll take that together. We work on the forecast for 9 months out of the year, and then we produce them and issue them in January. That chart you just saw, nobody else in the public has seen that. The first time we're presenting that publicly. We're hoping that with these reforms, our forecasts, they're never going to be perfect, but hopefully they'll be tighter and they'll actually reflect the generation and the demand that's coming online.
Great. Yeah, I think it would be a priority for me to make sure that that data is as accurate as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for being here. This is very enlightening. I have one question, and it relates to solar. So looking at page 11 of your presentation, let me get there. It says that solar right now is only generating in Maryland 1% of our energy. And you know, we put a lot of emphasis on solar programs, but my question is more about solar on a larger scale. Is there any utility level solar in the PJM now?
Yes, yeah, we do have utility scale solar. We have obviously community solar. We have
Yes.
rooftop solar, so there's small, medium, and large. But yes, we do have utility scale solar. We have some here in the state. SMECO has utility scale solar. We could use a lot more. As you may have heard from the MEA director, Maryland is falling short of meeting its requirement of having 14.5% in-state solar. We could
Right.
use a lot more.
So we do have utility level solar in Maryland?
We do.
Okay.
We have projects on the Eastern Shore. We have projects out in Washington County as well. Very
Okay.
controversial. I was at the
Yes.
PSC when we permitted many of these projects. Neighbors, some farmers that want to sell their land to get the revenue are pleased to do so, but some of the neighbors are not so much.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Delegate Fischer-Talgo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. Just a couple of quick questions. You were mentioning permitting. Can you touch a little bit upon what we did last year to help with permitting, particularly on community solar and the CPCN process and the expedited CPCN process? Because I know it's different in different states, but we tried to make a good attempt at kind of helping to streamline that.
Yes, yeah, and we have a number of projects right now that are moving through the PSC's expedited process that this legislature passed last year. We also have other projects, such as transmission projects, that are unable to take advantage of those provisions. So these could be multi-year timelines. One of the projects that we approved was a project being developed by PSEG, which is called the Piedmont Reliability Project. We have been on record that we need a CPCN from the PSC on an expedited basis, so this line could be in service by June 1st of 2027, next year. Absent that line being on service, we forecast that there is the substantial potential for blackouts across the state of Maryland if the line is not developed. This is science and engineering, so to the extent we could have further statutes that either expedite or provide additional resources to get these CPCNs, whether it be generation, as you've worked on last year, or transmission, that would be helpful. And this is no way to besmirch the PSC. It's a fine agency, which I had the honor of leading for 5 years. They just simply don't have the resources. And sometimes some of the state resource agencies, such as the good people at PPRP, they are overwhelmed right now with applications.
Okay, and just one follow-up, if I may. When you are working with the public service, when you're working with the PSC and trying to figure out a lot of this phantom load, and you're forecasting and reforecasting, that seems to me to be like one of the really big issues that we're having with, capacity markets and preparing for phantom data centers that aren't coming. Like, what confidence did you have in your new load forecasting that it's taking into consideration some of this? And how do you coordinate? I know the question was asked earlier, but I'd like something a little bit more granular about, like, how do you deal with any inconsistencies with our PSC? Since you ran it and I'm just trying to, because that's the meat of a lot of our problems, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how do we ensure that we limit that.
No, you're exactly right. The capacity market is tied to load forecasts of future demand. And we could set aside the PSC because they have not been involved in load forecasting until now. As noted, this is an issue that we weren't dealing with 24 months ago. So we're learning as we're doing, seeing the documents signed by Governor Moore, as well as the documents that were worked on by the PJM legislative body, Senator Katie Fry-Hester, and others. We believe that having additional input from the utilities, third-party experts, including the electric vehicle industry, will help us refine, hopefully within a few percentage points, if not closer, to predict. You saw that line earlier. It goes 20 years out. We're having some trouble predicting what's going to happen 12 or 24 months into the future. Getting everybody at the table at PJM before our load analysis subcommittee will help inform that. At the end of the day, the forecast will still be wrong. The question is by how much. And I'm happy to get you, and I know Delegate Delegate, you had some interest, so.
Delegate Baylor, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get you
Yeah,
one
I have many more questions, but I'll take them offline in the interest of allowing, having other members ask questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Delegate Jacobs.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Stanek, when you spoke briefly about transmission infrastructure, and I noticed on these maps in your presentation, pretty much the whole state of Delaware and the whole Eastern Shore is like blank with any high voltage line. Is there any plan at any time frame of when any sort of high power lines will be in those areas, and especially Eastern Shore?
Yeah, we currently have projects, including solar and storage projects on the Eastern Shore that would like to connect to the grid on the Eastern Shore. The grid on the Eastern Shore is relatively fragile, and we're having trouble connecting, and we're unfortunately in litigation with some of these developers now because we can't connect them, or if we do connect them, they would have to pay millions of dollars in interconnection costs. The problem is the question of, number one, who pays? Number two, who wants a high voltage transmission line cutting through either the existing right-of-way or through areas that which we call greenfield, that don't currently host a transmission line. We're having a devil of a time building a 67-mile line from the Conowingo area through Frederick and Carroll counties right now. 67 miles, it's been very difficult. Eastern Shore will be equally as difficult.
So there's no real time frame at this point?
We don't have any approved projects. We have several on the western side of the bay, but we don't have any major transmission lines under proposal currently.
Like you had indicated earlier, that there were several that I've heard from that wanted to be connected that couldn't be because of the limitation of the grid.
It's very, very, very limited. Of course, if and when offshore wind production off of the ocean comes on shore, we will need to secure the transmission system on your side of the bay in a substantial way and in a very costly way.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Stanek, thanks for your comments about improving load forecasting for data centers. When PSC Chairman Barve was presenting before us last week, that was one of his main concerns about phantom data centers. But he also said that an executive from a major developer told him that there isn't enough chip manufacturing capacity to build even 20% of all the data centers that are being planned. And so wanted to ask you if that's something that's come across your radar screen.
We've heard that, and that will also factor into the calculus of our load forecasting. Do we have a multiple of possible data centers being developed? Because as we know, it takes only about 18 months, if the chips are available, to build a data center from the ground up. But it's going to take us 5, 6, 7 years to build a new combined cycle natural gas plant in that same amount of time. So it's a legitimate concern. It's something that we will consider in our forecasting. If it's simply not feasible, if NVIDIA is not producing enough chips to effectively power all of these data centers, then we know our forecast will be off.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, just follow up. So this is something that has crossed our radar screen, and you're saying will be part of your assessment of whether a proposed data center actually could be built based on a number of factors, including whether the chips are available?
Yes to all of those questions, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here today. What percentage of the projects in the PJM are renewable? Can you speak to that?
At this point, almost all of them, 98%.
98%. Help me understand this. So Next Gen Energy Act requires an RFP for new energy sources. RFP goes out, it comes back short. Are you familiar with that?
I am not, no.
Okay, I'll skip that one then. I'm talking about nuclear for a moment. So when you speak to a lot of the, seems nuclear is a big part of the equation, but it's really hard to build. When you talk to a lot of the players, the struggle with developing new capacity for nuclear in any form is an investment over many years that just comes with a lot of uncertainty. Is there any way you know to bridge that gap, if we were to pursue some kind of nuclear solution to facilitate what seems to be a reliable baseload growth?
The state attempted to do that 20 years ago at Calvert Cliffs to build a new reactor. To build a new reactor today in the state would take probably an equal 20-year period there. Small modular reactors is a technology type that we're looking at, but it's not at the cusp. I don't believe we have any nuclear projects in the queue at this point. As I noted, 97, 98%, mostly solar, battery, and wind. I would note that over the past 2 years, approximately 90% of the projects that have cleared the queue have been clean energy projects.
Okay, and one final point. So the most pertinent slide, I think, in your presentation isn't actually about data centers at all. It's slide 14 when it says 6,000 megawatts has been taken off the grid and we've added 1,600. That seems to be the big hurdle for us. And when you made your comments about, today nuclear gives us it's a solution with a 90% effectiveness rate, and solar is about 7%. It seems we need to find a way to bring these more reliable, more consistent energy providers as part of the big picture math. But as you've said, 95, 98% of the projects in the PJM queue are renewable. How do we deal with that?
That is a challenge. It's maintaining the grid in the light of these constraints, both transmission and generation constraints. How we deal with that is developing new resources, doing it as quickly as possible, recognizing how difficult that is, but also keeping in mind that each fuel type brings with it a different set of performance standards to the grid. Nuclear, 95%, others south of that.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll talk quickly because I'm watching your clock too. Mr. Stanek, thank you for being here. So I'm trying to get to something really basic. Maybe it's basic because I'm not smart. We have a goal to get to, in 2031 to a certain percentage of everything being renewable. And I put together slides 10, 11, and 14. I add to it, Doug, or Graham just said that 98% of the projects are renewable in the pipeline. With that being said, are we going to be able to hit that goal with the present information that we have and what's being projected?
I no longer have the most recent information, but I think you heard from Director Speaks-Bachman last week that Maryland would likely fall short, at least on its solar goals. So I don't want to speak to the RPS in the state as to whether or not you'll hit those targets by 2030. Of course, you could always buy renewable energy credits from out of state to make up that difference, right? So you don't need to build all the solar and wind in the state, but you could purchase those attributes from out-of-state generators.
Okay, I'll come back later. Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, there's a mechanism in the RPS. If they can't do it, they can pay an alternative compliance payment, correct?
Yes.
I know that's your old job, but.
That was my old job when, at one point, the balance of the ACP budget was about $50,000. Everybody was buying RECs. Nobody was paying the alternative compliance payment.
A little different now.
It's a little different.
Yeah, Delegate Healy?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to welcome my constituent to the committee. I didn't think you lived in College Park. Have you moved?
Proud resident of Riverdale. Most people don't know where Riverdale is, so District 22, yes.
Yes, I remember knocking on your door a couple times.
You have been up yes, and my dogs have been hopefully polite to you.
They have been. Thank you so much for being here and for bringing your expertise to us.
Thank you, Delegate, and thank you for your service to this body over the past 2 decades.
Delegate Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. And my concern for my constituents, obviously their electric bill. So I guess my question would be, what can Maryland do now or in the next year or two to help decrease residential customers' all-time high electric bills?
That is a great question. I think my second to last slide lists some of those solutions, but working with your Public Service Commission who is your state utility regulator. They approve all of the utility rates. They have the ability to reassign and reallocate costs. But also, what I said, take a look at your utility bill and see, are there any ways to remove state-imposed fees, surcharges? If not remove them, perhaps reduce them. And while not an immediate fix, whatever we could do to encourage investment in our state to build energy infrastructure, that will, over the longer term, have a downward pressure on retail utility bills.
One more question. And what are your personal thoughts on starting up our shut-down power plants throughout Maryland? I have one that's just sitting idle in my district.
Yeah, which plant is that?
Williamsport plant.
Yeah, Williamsport, right. That is, I understand a number of plants are looking at that. Some of our plants across the PJM region that have retired or have signaled an intent to retire have contacted us and say, you know what, we're going to keep running because of the higher capacity price. So that price signal, even though it's painful for customers, it's keeping generators that would have otherwise retired sticking around for another year or two. I don't have a personal thought anymore. I used to have a lot when I was at the PSC, but we could.
I think it would be important, but.
No, we need that generation. We need any generation back on the system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Zach, when you were chair of the PSC, though, did you have the authority to shut down a power plant? Is that something the state does?
No.
So the power plants are owned by private owners, and they make those decisions, and they have to go through a process, but it's not something that the state can turn on and off on its own.
Exactly right, yes.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Ziegler, last question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So on the ELCC class ratings, the 7% for solar, does that include storage, or is that?
No.
Okay.
No, oftentimes solar and storage are packaged together and actually built adjacent to each other. Storage, depending on if it's a 4, 6, or 8-hour battery, they have different ratings. The higher the output, 8 hours would get a higher rating than a 4-hour battery. So when you package a solar and a solar project and a battery, what we'll do is we'll calculate what the rate is. So that solar at 7% would go up.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you very much again for being here, and thank you, my colleagues, for being so efficient with your questioning. I know we'll be seeing more of you, so appreciate your time. Colleagues, we are going to reset the system to do the second part of our briefing this afternoon, so everyone sit tight while we reload. Thank you.